big chapters understanding, where how AI can actually create value, right? It's not that magic wand. Then how, what are the usual challenges, what organizations fail in order to create value, and there's like a couple of known ones, but most of them are actually unknown for a lot of organizations and for a lot of people.
Ever wondered how AI can create value for businesses beyond the hype? Dr. Michael Prok debunks common misconceptions and highlights the importance of a holistic approach. Learn about the 5 essential elements: technology, analytics, data, business, and psychology that are crucial for successful AI implementation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mike, for the invite.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. I really do. It takes time out of your busy day, and I know it's kind of the end of the day for you. So could you tell me, tell me a little bit about your journey that led you to where you are today, where you've become an expert in AI?
You want the long or the short version?
Whichever one you feel like giving me.
So, my background actually is in business and economics, and I started my journey at the university, did my MBA and PhD, and I specialized in, as I said, economics, statistics, and consumer psychology. And then this now, yeah, a century ago, left academia, came to industry, made my way through market research, and realized back in the days how messy data really is, and how hard it is to get high quality data, and how much effort it is to actually collect that data. But what I also learned is a lot of things about data and data management, but what I also had the chance to, I developed new innovative technologies to improve market research and to use new digital data, to use new analytics. And I was very lucky to get picked up from one of the elite data and innovation consultancies in Europe, Tromsø and Junior, today TD Reply. And I was very lucky to work with one of the famous professors, Professor Junior himself, and of course a wonderful team. But what I learned back in the days, and that's now 11 years ago, we didn't have much, right? It's not like you go in a store and you buy dashboard technologies and you have the cloud and the sky, and we had the sky, we didn't have cloud. So what we did, we had to build everything from scratch, right? We had to plug together mail servers. That was our distributed computing, and we had to build our own dashboard technology, so a lot of web technology, Ruby, and we had to build our own storytelling dashboards. And what we realized back in the days by doing that, there was working for a lot of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 organizations, especially in Europe and in Asia. We saw that there was more than, in order to create value, there was more than just technology and analytics. So we saw that there's this formula, that value creation formula, had a couple more elements to it. And usually people agree with me when I talk about those elements, right? We talk about technology, we talk about analytics, we talk about or AI, we talk about data. People usually agree with that, and then we talk about business. Yeah, okay, if it has to be, and then we talk about psychology, and people say, yeah, that change management thing, that's really, it's a thing, and then everything equals value. Right. And in general, people say, yep, you're totally right. Right. But then for some reason, people don't put those formula fully together. Right. And they say, I focus on technology and analytics, and that the others do the rest. Right. And then you have other people that do some business, and other people do some data, and somebody else does something around psychology and change management. But for some reason, we realized back in the days that this relationship is not additive, right? It's not like you can compensate, missing business acumen with a better technology, right? If you don't have any application to business, then there's no value created. And with that said, this relationship is actually multiplicative. So it means that if you miss one of those pieces, the value is always zero. And that really explains today why we have so many organizations failing with AI projects, and so many startups failing with AI products, because what they forget, or what they miss, is that this relationship is multiplicative, and they need to think about all those 5 factors in order to create value. And as we started looking at it from a different perspective, we saw a huge improvement on value creation. And we were very lucky to work with a lot of organizations that believed in us and let us do a lot of really cool things for them worldwide in a lot of markets. But what we saw more and more, we focused on that full formula. We really created value pretty fast. And then from there, um, I got the chance to travel a lot, and then I thought about, okay, what is my personal next step? And I came to New York because, if you make it in New York, you make it everywhere. So I thought, hey, New York must be pretty cool. And I had my chance with Aetna CVS, and then I got the chance to work for H2O, one of the AI leaders in the space, being there, helping them with the international global insurance business, and then later on transformation. And then I started my own journey in writing my book, because then I realized that a lot of things I did, I was like repeating that formula, and explaining people that there's more to it than just the technology. And then I started writing on the book, which is now has been a 2-year journey. And I actually shared the book with a friend of mine, Dr. Wilhelm Bieler, CIO of Premier Tech in Canada. And he read it and said, Michael, we need to work on that. Okay. I'm maybe I'm not an author. And then he said, like, you can't just, throw out the problems. You need to show the solutions you developed over many years. So we actually put that together, and then we realized we were missing a piece. For some reason we had a piece missing. And one of my mentors back in the days, still till today, and friends, Nisha Palival, managing vice president of Capital One, and I explained to her the concept, and she was intrigued right away. And we put together kind of a framework that has all those factors together, and going through in that book on 4 big chapters, understanding how AI can actually create value, right? It's not that magic wand. Then how what are the usual challenges, what organizations fail in order to create value. And there's like a couple of known ones, but most of them are actually unknown for a lot of organizations and for a lot of people, because they, as I said, they focus on one of 2 of those 5 elements. And when we were putting that together, we realized that there's a bigger framework, and it started all to come together, right? And then we realized the part where we said, okay, how do we now integrate it into organizations, right? And we started putting the framework together. If you have one use case, right, and you're successful with that, and you've been really lucky, yes, like picking the right one, and getting all the bits and pieces together. And then how do you make like big legacy organizations? How do you integrate AI into those? Because the resistance there is pretty strong, right? So what are the bits and pieces there? So we wrote about that, and then we wrote about all the capabilities, and other authors were very helpful in putting all that together. And then Nisha is like a very community-oriented person, and she was working with a lot of charities and working a lot in a community. And she said, we talked to so many people, and we invested so many time with so many people to get all those insights and let them speak themselves. So we opened it up, and then we were really lucky to get a couple of very interesting people on the book, and friends and colleagues, and like the CDO of Hewlett Packard, Scott Halworth, or the CDO of Saatchi and Saatchi, or CBS Corporation, and Chief Digital Officer of Genpact, and a couple others. So we're really lucky that they really liked the concept and said that was something that was missing. So we got their personal stories and best practices and learnings and all that. We got to put that in the book, and that's my journey. And last year I joined Accelerate, working together with the University of Maryland Global Campus as their chief scientist, driving exactly what I'm writing in the book for the university. So that was a longer story. Thanks,
That's amazing.
for the question.
You covered a lot of ground on that, which is great. So what do you think is the most common misconception about AI in businesses today?
Um, I think that people think AI is is something totally new and seem to forget everything they learned before. I think that, that's number one. Um, or number two is that they consider it on the other side of the spectrum. They consider it like software development, right? Which is also not true. So there's a big misunderstanding what AI actually is and how AI can actually contribute to value. I think that's the biggest challenge for most organizations out there to really grasp what they can do with AI and how they can and should use it.
Makes sense. I mean, I think I love when you said that they think it's something new, because I mean it's true. It's not really new. Um, it's just interesting that it's like kind of exploded on the scene right now. Like I was telling another guest the other day that I get so many emails advertising, some sort of AI enhanced product. And honestly, I haven't seen it's funny. He asked me, what do you think is the most innovative use of AI by a company that wasn't truly like using it in a way, like, how to put it, in an obvious manner, right in front of people. It's there. I'm using AI. Um, Amazon. I think Amazon's suggestion, not the suggestion, the summarization of your ratings on a product. I think it's a brilliant use of AI, because as more people add comments and reviews, the AI is tireless and just continually updating its summary. But it helps you with things because, especially, you get a product that has like 10,000 reviews, and I want to know, like, well, what's the quality of the case on the device? Like, is it strong? Is it weak? The AI summarizes it for you and says this, purchasers say that the battery life is wonderful, but the case feels kind of plastic. Well, it tells me what I want to know, and I think that's one of the more innovative approaches to it. But other than that, I mean, most of the tools that I see out there that are coming out, that aren't designed like with like a company like yours in mind, they're very weak. Like, they don't do much. A lot of them look like they're just wrappers around
Yeah.
some other, generative AI tool. So
Yeah.
I don't know. So but with that in mind,
But
um,
I love the example you actually brought, the Amazon example, because like when we talk about AI, we usually let's talk about it in a very mysterious way, like in a very holistic way. People don't like to go on the details, right? And I was like, oh, that is AI. Okay, what is actually AI? Right. But in this case, it's a wonderful example. If you think about, like, it summarizes all the Amazon um, reviews, but what does it mean if it says the battery is not good? So does it mean like 500 people mentioned that out of the 1,000 comments, or is it just two? So
right.
how common is actually that problem? They don't tell you that. So it's like the summary might be interesting, but it also might, forget pieces that are for you
Good
very
point.
interesting, right? Or somebody says, okay, in somebody lives in, Texas, compared to, Connecticut, right? So the whatever you buy, it's not good in heat, right? But Amazon doesn't pick up that it's not good in heat. It's just, it just says, the answers were good besides, one or two, but it doesn't tell you the context, right? So that's the complicated part with generative AI, that it really needs to get the context in order to give you the right answer. So it doesn't, it might mean everything or nothing, and so you don't know, right? And AI doesn't know the
Good
reasoning what
point.
you actually want to have in order to make a valid decision about it. Right? When I think about AI, I think something when people think about AI, they think about, um they have a misconception of AI. First, they think AI is compared to humans, right? So intelligence of humans, and that's not right, because they also don't they miss they have a misconception of intelligence. People usually associate intelligence with wisdom. You have a wise person that's a very intelligent person, right? Or you have a person that is just very good in remembering knowledge. Is that person now a wise person, or is that person actually intelligent, or just good in remembering stuff? Because that's where the clue is. AI is usually just really good in remembering stuff. Putting something new together, right? Going to ChatGPT, and I really like to play around with it, right? And going there and let's say, okay, if you have that, if you have the premium membership, you can ask for please create a picture for me, and you ask it to create a picture that hasn't been done before. Like for me, it's like I work with a lot of organizations, and like AI transformation, right? Which is a very wobbly topic, right? So you say, okay, good, create a picture for AI transformation. You know what you have in mind. AI can't come up with anything that is in any way interesting or reflects that, because there's just no, it hasn't been trained on it, right? If you say you want a green cat, that works wonderful, right? Because I know what the concept green puts it wonderfully together. But if you have something where you say, please tell me the future of something, it just represents what it knows, what we think the future looks like. It doesn't come up with anything new. It doesn't come up with anything that, oh yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about it. Right. And that's like where people make that, need to understand that there's one thing that is wisdom and the other one that is like just the accumulation of knowledge. And that's where AI currently is, and we're struggling with reasoning and all those things, and we realize that it doesn't really work that way. And because that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, is the understanding and putting value to the wisdom, putting not value on that knowledge, right? And it doesn't actually come from me. Fun fact, it actually comes from a famous professor, assistant theorist from Wharton School, Professor Ackhoff, in the 80s. So it's not like, he already knew that like 30, 40 years ago, and nothing has really changed. He was talking about machines. He didn't use the word AI, but I love to read his paper. It has a paper from data to wisdom, and I don't know, I read it at least 20 times. I always find new things. It's one of the most interesting and most inspiring papers I've ever I ever read. And I always like to recommend it. It's really available. People can download it. Just reading about it, it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I can tell you have a passion for data for sure. I can tell it's and I always tell people like I was a software developer for over 10 years, and then I was a CTO for 20 years, and database administrator, for instance, just a DBA. It's the one position that like you'll you'll say to them, okay, I can remember DBA coming to me one time. We had this big plan. We had a project that ran for like 6 months, and we were approaching the launch date. And he asked me to move the launch date by 2 days because he wanted to speed up a stored procedure by like 1 millisecond. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And he said, why? And I said, because nobody out there on that floor that's going to use this software is going to notice that 1 millisecond. I said, you're welcome after the software is released to add that to the next iteration. But now we're not holding up the release after 6 months for that. But data people think very differently, not just about data, but just about like the whole approach. And like, I always found it interesting that he had the guts to even come after 6 months and be like, hey, can we delay this for 2 days so that I can just like make this minuscule little speed up of the query? And to him, though, that extra millisecond faster was huge, but to most of the end users, they wouldn't have cared. In fact, he eventually did put it into the software, and nobody ever said a word. It was just, obviously they're not sitting there counting with a timer, but so let's talk about something, because you brought up a couple of things about issues that business have, and where AI's come from. What kind of emerging trends do you think will be most significant for businesses in the next 5 years with AI?
Predictions about the future are the hottest ones.
Always.
Right. That's why, and I usually try to not do that, because it always goes different than I think it goes. But I think I'd say what we need to do in order to to create values in over the next 5 years is actually, and I know I changed the question a little bit, but it's going it's like we need to go back to the basics and actually understand them, right? So what we're trying to do, we try to paint over the wall with new technology, new hype stuff over and over again. We don't realize that nothing comes out of it, and it's still not better than it was before, because we forget all the basics we have to do. And I think that's an important piece. But I agree with one thing, that we can't stand still in order to get all the, to get everything right, and then in 10 years we're gonna do it right. I think that's another wrong way of doing it. I think that needs to be an incremental way of how can we move forward and do it better. And I think bringing all the elements together we just talked about, I think that's something organizations see a trend that they're gonna go back and say, hey, great, what do we actually need to do? And I think that's something that hopefully is a trend. So I hope for it. I don't know. I just really hope that organizations see their mistake and go one step back. But I mean, definitely right now, biggest trend is generative AI, and seeing how we create wonderful pictures and movies and texts and everything else. So everybody thinks they're going to get fired, and takes over the world. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the moment, yes, but as soon as you get 50 messages that were written from ChatGPT in an email, like you get a lot of emails, right? You start to read that it's not really human. That
Yeah.
AI wrote that, and then it becomes something that is not authentic, right? You put less value to it. You throw it out right away. So it could even be a really cool person that sent you that email but used AI to write it, but you throw it out. It's like, okay, cool. There's nothing authentic to that email. And I think that's the big risk we have in the future, that we think AI is going to take care of it, but then we actually don't want it. It sounds cool, but it's actually not what we want, because authenticity, and we talked about psychology right before, is
Right.
something we value very highly, right? So you don't want to have totally non-authentic art, or articles that all sound the same, or why doing it,
Well,
right?
yeah, well, I mean, like you're right. I get a lot of emails from like somebody has taught offshore development teams that they should do cold outreach to tech companies and try to get hired. And I have a lot more respect, honestly, for those that come through and they're like, I'm a development team in India and their English is very sparse and broken English, but they're trying versus the ones who they're from the same place and they send me a perfectly written email that's completely uninspiring and not motivating at all. And I say to myself, yeah, ChatGPT probably wrote that, or one of the other chat AI tools. And I don't have as much respect for that person, because at least the other person is trying to show you who they are, what they can do. Because can you imagine you get on a call with somebody who sent you like a perfectly worded email, and then you can't understand a word they say because their English is so bad? It would be like such a waste of time for everybody. But it's becoming more and more obvious. I mean, I know, like, I don't quite understand why anyone would care about this, but like I've heard rumblings about Google will take they're planning on like de-ranking articles that were written using AI, because you have to write it yourself. But what happens to all the people who hire writers to write those blog posts in the first place? It's a human, but it wasn't me that wrote it, it's someone else that wrote it. I don't understand why anyone would care about that, but it is. So
Right.
if Google's so confident that they can identify AI content, it's probably not that difficult to identify AI content.
I mean, I don't think that I don't really have a problem with people using ChatGPT or any of those to if they feel like they need it in order to express themselves, right? That they couldn't say what they want to say, right? Which is a good reasoning, right? For me, it's more like the content that's in it that becomes shallow. So it's like, write an email for me that is for a CTO and gets him interested in answering me, right? So then the content becomes totally nonsense. Like there's no content at all, right? If you write an email to a CTO and say, hey, ChatGPT, can you make it sound better? I was like, I just don't feel comfortable sending that out, because like I don't think I have the right grammar, or my English is not good enough. And then it starts to improve it, but the content and the juice is there. You just help to express yourself, right? then you even try it out and change it here and there and say,
Yeah.
then it becomes something that's totally fine, right? And I think that's what this technology is good for when we talked about wisdom and knowledge, right? So here we use our wisdom to actually know the different bits and pieces, right, that ChatGPT can provide, or whatever Gen AI tools that we then put together in a new way. Then it's a wise move to combine different knowledge, because we can actually put value to the different bits and pieces. While when we just say, hey, ChatGPT, write something for me, it can only use knowledge. There's no wisdom. There's nothing new. There's nothing interesting. There's nothing, and I think that's when people ask me, what do you think is, and I have been talking a lot about the role of people next to AI in the
Yeah.
future, right? It's like where exactly that point where we get AI to augment bits and pieces we're doing, but at the end, it's our wisdom that brings creativity, that puts value to it,
Definitely.
in order to make it unique, authentic, and interesting for people to read. And I think that's a critical piece that, when people say, okay, are we going to be unimportant in the future? I don't think we will. I think we will be more important, because all those creative fields are going to become more and more interesting. It's the knowledge tasks that are going to get more automated, but I don't think people will become less important. And then on the other side, sorry, is like
No.
where if you have technology that replaces people, why do you have then technology? Right? If you don't do it for people, right? If you don't create value in a bigger scale, then it doesn't really help. I think there's an end-to-end thinking we still need to put in place. Right? One of the things I had somebody telling me, hey, we use ChatGPT to write an RFP, right? And did it within within an hour or two, you wrote the whole RFP. And then I said, hey, that's great, but have you actually thought it end to end? So what happens with that RFP? You send it to 10 vendors. So what do? They take the RFP and say to ChatGPT, please answer it. Right? So you then get 10 answers from ChatGPT to your ChatGPT written RFP. And then you have a
Right.
very smart engineer or analyst or whoever sits there and then gets the brilliant idea. I don't want to read the 30 pages, right? I just throw it into ChatGPT. I say, ChatGPT, which one of those 10 answers, 300 pages is the best answer to my RFP? And then, it picks number two. But why and how?
Right.
ChatGPT wrote it, ChatGPT answered it, and then it gets, okay, we pick two. So everything becomes random, and the disaster you can already see coming. Hey, because nobody thinks it end to end, right? It sounds cool, but I, you know,
Well, it's like this show. I sit here, I talk to people for, half an hour to an hour, multiple times a day. I take notes on what they say. I pick out what I think is the theme of the episode. And in the end, what I actually do utilize Chat GPT in my workflow, but it's really more as like a research assistant. I'll take the transcript of the show and I'll put it in there. And it's like the old garbage in, garbage out stuff. The more you tell it about what you want, the more authentic of a response you're going to get back. So I'll feed it this transcript and I'll say, all right, I had this interview. These are the things that I think are key points about it. Can you please pull out, give me a narrative summary around those issues and give me some timestamps where this has been discussed. And then from that, I can pull like best quotes from whatever you've said. And it tells me exactly where in the transcript it is. I don't have to read the entire transcript. It tells me exactly where it is. But I've even tried telling it to like, here, write me a narrative summary of the entire episode. Well, when it comes out, I'm like, well, I sat through this episode and that wasn't really that important as you're making it sound. And the only way I would be able to use what it gave me is I'd almost have to rewrite the whole thing. And so then I say to myself, I want it in my voice anyway, so I might as well just write it. But so I mean, it has its points. Like there's a story you've probably you're involved with AI, so you've probably heard this story. But I've told it on this show multiple times. But I was reading this article on Reddit of all places, and this mom was talking about ChatGPT, and she took her 2-year-old to like one of those places where they have like trampolines. And after that, for whatever weird reason, they started having strange neurological issues. And she went to all sorts of specialists, and no one could really figure out what was wrong. So one night she was awake, as typical as a mom would be, and she couldn't sleep because of her child. Like, what the heck's wrong with my child? How are we going to fix this? So she sat down with all the medical reports that she got from the doctors, and she keyed it into Chat GPT, and it gave her a diagnosis. And she brought it to the neurologist, and the neurologist said, never in a million years would I have thought this is what it is, but it kind of sounds like it might be. Turned out it was right. Now, granted, it was right in that situation, but the point is really that it took a whole bunch of information, and in a neutral fashion, without any emotion at all, it distilled it down to something that maybe, I have to believe sometimes doctors, they are afraid of what's going in their head, because here's this little 2-year-old sitting in front of them, and they're thinking, oh, it might be this. God, I have to tell the parent that. Maybe it's not that. Here, let's try this first. Let's try that first. ChatGPT just went, no emotions. Here's what the data says the problem is. It's either this or this. They gave it 2 diagnoses. It's just interesting. I think tools like that are going to have a huge use in the future, but who knows? But this kind of leads me to a question, because you've been talking a lot about some really interesting things, people who you've worked with. What do you have any kind of like unexpected source of information that you've ever encountered in your work with AI and data science? Like, just totally, wow, I can't believe I was inspired by that.
What do you mean, an unexpected source? Can you give an example?
Well, like, I mean, imagine like for me, I can remember one time trying to solve a software problem, and my 7-year-old looked at me and said, well, why don't you just make it do whatever they
Yeah.
said? And
Okay.
then I thought, wow, can't exactly do that, but that's a good idea, and I went down that road, and I actually solved the problem using that idea. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think I think I really I like the approach, and I would say if you ask me like that, in every project I have that. So it's like what I try to do, and what I learned over time is to listen and not to talk,
Listen,
which
yeah.
sounds hard because I've been talking a lot. But it's more like really learning from the people that are like when I work with organizations, and they usually give me a problem, and they usually come with the answer. They think it is the answer, right? Because that's
Yeah.
like when people come to you and say, hey, yeah, we don't know how to do that. I think we need a recommendation. I think it is a recommendation engine. I don't know. Let me investigate, right? And I've seen that going wrong so many times, right? People talk about, you have data scientists sitting there, I have a business guy sitting there, and the business guy is talking about something, and the data scientist hears what they want to hear, right? Especially the recommendation thing, right? I would like to have a recommendation what I'm supposed to do. Oh, he wants to have a recommendation engine. No, that's not what he meant. Right? So and I think what I like to do is internships. I like to intern with my stakeholders. I like to learn what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then try to make a picture, and come up with something I think that could be very valuable. And usually I'm wrong with that too. And then over time it gets better, right? You ask more and more questions, and people look what you're doing. And in this iterative process, we also talking about in the book, like you develop tools that are actually very, very helpful and really create value. And I think every time I do that, I learn something totally new. And I learned something that I would have never thought about. And I was very lucky to work in many industries. Um, in car manufacturing, telecommunications, food, soft drinks, wine, I had milk, whatever you can think of. It's like I had a chance to do something there, and I always learned. So I'm very, very lucky that I get to learn every day, and every time I have a project, I learn something new to it. But also I can apply a lot of stuff that comes from all the other knowledge from other industries that I can apply in order to speed it up, right? But that's then, as we talked about, knowledge and wisdom, but I'm at least humble enough to know that I don't know a lot of stuff.
Well, and that's the thing. It's not only just listening. It's actually, and some people don't think there's a difference between this, but It's hearing what the person is saying, because you can listen and just let it go in one ear and out the other ear. But hearing is actually saying, didn't think about that. I should look into this. Might not be the answer, but maybe it is. Because you're absolutely right. Like when I was a CTO, my gosh, I had to actually, I'm not even kidding. I had to actually go to the fall places. I'm going to give my age away here. I had to go to Radio Shack and buy like a little timer. And
Mhm.
people would come in and they'd say, Mike, do you have 5 minutes to talk about something with the software? Sure. Like 25 minutes later, they'd still be there. So I started setting a timer. How much time do you need? 5 minutes? At 5 minutes, if this timer goes off, we're going to have to schedule a meeting. I can't
Mhm.
do this every day. Well, I learned that by sitting there and hearing their advice, like, I think the software should do this, they weren't always right. Sometimes they helped solve problems they didn't even know existed in the software. You could say, oh, wait a second. And you could explore it with them. Like, how often does it happen? When does it happen? What did you do right before and right after that happened? You could narrow down problems. And so the key was just like using the users as like source material. Like, you guys use the software way more than I do. What do you see with it? So interesting. So this is an interesting topic, AI in general. I mean, I've probably had multiple AI people on, and every discussion has been entirely different, because you're all of you like AI experts, you're all in your little lane that you're doing your stuff. So real interesting. Why don't you let the listeners know how they can connect with you?
Um, yeah, just reach out via LinkedIn, or we have a website to the book. It's aivaluesecrets.com. So we have a little community around there. You get a lot of extra information material. We have a little forum where we talk to each other, we talk with each
Cool.
other. So please join us. And if you open the book, that little QR code, you can scan it and get access. Um, yeah, just join us and reach out. Let's talk. Very happy to talk. I put aside every week a couple of hours that I can connect with new people and get new perspectives on things and learn from others. So we even apologize at the end of the book if we miss something. If something's wrong, let us know. Edition number two, we try to correct it. So yeah, we would be happy to get your feedback. So read the book and come back and talk to us about it.
Yeah, great. Well, I encourage listeners to do that. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today, because I know it's hard to take time out of your schedule.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your time, of course.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it. So thanks everybody for being here, listening to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. Comes out every Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific, on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Uh, Hope you come back next week for another exciting conversation like this one, and have a great week.